Hey, everybody. It is Monday, October 27th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Nunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to as we begin this Halloween week. Jill, it's more like a Halloween month, Halloween season. It's way more than just trick-or-treating on Friday, as it turns out. The numbers are out. Consumers are expected this year to spend just over $13 billion with a B on the holiday, eclipsing the all-time record of 2023 when Americans spent just over $12 billion. It was slightly down from that last year, but we're back this year. Per person spending expected to reach $115 per person on Halloween, $11 more than last year.
When you say Halloween month or Halloween week, I'm on now I've done 3 Halloween events already, and we're still about 5 days until Halloween. By the way, a third of the spending is on costumes alone. So between adults and children and pets, consumers will spend about $4.3 billion on costumes. Another $4 billion is expected to be spent on candy, chocolate, and holiday treats.
Yeah, among the issues there, cocoa prices way up due to drought and other weather issues where most cocoa is grown in West Africa. Jill, one remarkable stat. You mentioned the costume spending. So about $2 billion on adult costumes, $1.4 billion on children's costumes, and Americans spend $860 million on costumes for their pets. I'm always blown away by some of these figures.
Okay, now to the headlines. An update on the closely followed investigation into the Louvre heist last week. Several suspects were arrested over the weekend. Officials increasingly think that this robbery of more than $100 million worth of items was an inside job. Over in the Caribbean, the U.S. sending some of its most powerful warships to the region as tensions continue to heighten with Venezuela, what both U.S. and Venezuelan leaders are saying about a potential war.
This will be the biggest story we're watching this week. America's largest aircraft carrier is set to arrive in the region at the end of the week.
Also in the Caribbean, a Cat 5 hurricane expected to bring catastrophic flooding and landslides to Jamaica and Haiti. Over in Asia, President Trump's arrived for key economic talks. The U.S. and Chinese leaders say that they are going to meet on the sidelines of this summit and that they have outlines of a tariff deal, what it could look like. And in other tariff news, Trump is raising tariffs on Canadian goods by 10%. And Moshe, it has to do with a TV commercial.
Trump very unhappy with one of the ads that aired during the World Series.
Back here in the U.S., the government shutdown continues as healthcare costs rise for Americans and federal workers go without paychecks. In other news, Travis Kelce, a.k.a. Taylor Swift's fiancé, jumping in to save Six Flags theme parks just when it needs it most. Will the two be making an appearance there soon? And tech moves into the bathroom and it's watching your waste. We're not talking about what's in the garbage. What you need to know about smart toilet technology.
It's equal parts invasive and informative, Jill.
And Moshe's on This Day in History.
We have a 1989 themed on This Day in History.
Okay, let's start in Paris. The latest on the Louvre heist. Moshe, we may be approaching the end of this real-life movie. Saturday night, French police arrested at least 2 suspects in connection to last week's heist. Authorities aren't revealing much about the arrests, although we're learning that one of the suspects was trying to leave the country for Algeria from Paris's Charles de Gaulle airport as he was arrested. It was just last Sunday when at least 4 thieves made off with more than $100 million worth of stolen jewels from the famous museum in Paris. They broke in about a half hour after the museum opened on Sunday morning, and they completed the entire operation within just 7 minutes. And that led many to believe that this was an inside job. The thieves eventually escaped on scooters. They made it out with historic diamond-crusted tiaras, jewelry, and other precious artifacts. It is not clear if police have received any of these stolen items.
Yeah, that was the concern here as the days went on, is that they could break apart these items, sell off the jewels, unless they were stealing them for a specific collector. That's unclear at this point. The French police actually very annoyed that it got out. They arrested a couple suspects on Saturday night because they're concerned now that that will lead potentially other suspects. Remember, at least 4 if they only arrested 2. And now that those still on the loose are aware that others have been arrested, it could make them more difficult to track down. As for the investigation here, the head of the Louvre acknowledged during a French Senate hearing last week that much of the museum's security system is badly outdated. It turns out that the only exterior camera near where the thieves broke in was facing away from the window, so that didn't really help that much. The thieves were able to break in by posing as construction workers, using a ladder mounted on a truck to reach the second floor. They broke in through the windows using power tools, cut through reinforced glass, and so they have nearly 100 investigators right now in France in search of these guys. In fact, they were able to collect some DNA traces, and the reporting right now is that that is how they were able to arrest these two individuals, through a DNA trace. They've also been analyzing video surveillance footage that was useful here. But given what they know and how quickly this took place, increasingly French investigators believe that security at the Louvre, or certain members of security at the Louvre, might have been in on this. The Paris prosecutor's office is among those who believe that might be the case. Right now, the Louvre is going through a $100 million security overhaul project. It's taken years to get approved. It's going to take years to complete. Refurbished command centers, more surveillance cameras, an updated badging system. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, announced this a while ago, but it's been way behind. So right now, the theory continues to be, at least publicly, until more things leak out, that it was either some collector who had these guys do it and worked with some Louvre security to get them in, or, of course, the theory number two, as I mentioned, the breaking apart of all of these royal jewels and then selling all of the various gems separately. So it's a story we'll continue to track. Given the high interest, Jill, I posted a video on Friday of George Clooney being asked about this because the new Ocean's 14 script has been completed. And he was asked about this on a red carpet last week. And he's intrigued, as all of us are intrigued by all of this. And he was asked, like, well, do you need to incorporate this into your latest Danny Ocean script? And you could tell based on like what Clooney was saying, like he was genuinely impressed with these guys and what they pulled off, and whether he needs now to tweak Ocean's 14 accordingly.
Okay, now on to another international story we've been following closer to home, the escalating military tensions with Venezuela. The U.S. is sending some of its most powerful warships toward Venezuela as tensions rise with President Nicolas Maduro's government. The Pentagon confirmed Friday that the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier and its associated warships are heading to the region. They're redeploying from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean in the coming days, and they carry more than 5,000 sailors and Marines. They're set to arrive later this week. Over the weekend, the USS Gravely, which is a guided missile destroyer, docked in Trinidad and Tobago's capital. Maduro called it an attempt to fabricate a, quote, new eternal war against his country. The U.S. already has warships, marine units, drones, fighter planes, and surveillance aircraft in the area, and has thousands of troops lined up in Puerto Rico and elsewhere in the region. This is the biggest U.S. military buildup in the region in 40 years. Also, late last week, the U.S. carried out a 10th strike on a boat allegedly carrying drugs in international waters. The strikes have killed dozens that the administration is calling narco-terrorists in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific Ocean on routes typically used to ship marijuana and cocaine to Europe and West Africa. Trump said late last week that he plans to expand strikes beyond the sea into mainland Venezuela. He also told reporters Thursday that he would not seek a formal congressional declaration of war to do so, but would just proceed and kill suspected members of drug cartels. The moves are part of Trump's expanded anti-narcotics and anti-terror campaign, but also reflect a broader effort to force Maduro from power. Washington has accused Maduro of being deeply involved in the drug trade. He has refused to step down after losing re-election last year. President Trump appears to be pressuring Maduro to willingly step down or compel allies of Maduro to force him into exile in the short term ahead of a military escalation or invasion. On Thursday, the Venezuelan dictator issued an emphatic plea for calm. Here's a bit of what he had to say on state TV, where he was asking for peace.
Not war, not war, not war. Just peace, just peace, just peace. Forever, forever, forever. Peace forever. No crazy war. No a la guerra loca. No crazy war, no crazy war.
Okay, Moshe, so he does not want a war. What do we know about the Trump administration's latest move in the region? What is this actually about?
I'll start by saying I'm not sure that message from Maduro, sort of in his broken English, landed very well with the White House. No war, no crazy war. And then he sort of refers to, he goes back to Spanish. He's like, this is the language of Tarzan in the jungle, which is sort of viewed as an insult, referring to Trump as Tarzan. Anyway, the point of it all is that the Trump administration clearly is losing patience with Maduro here. Trump has been frustrated with him going back to the first term. And remember that Maduro, has been in charge for a while. You had Hugo Chavez before him. And the two of them over the last 20 years have effectively destroyed the Venezuelan economy, turned it from the richest country in South America to the poorest country in South America. And there are a lot of people within the Trump administration, in particular Secretary of State Rubio, who believe that Maduro has to go. And that's been part of the Trump agenda. That was part of the Biden agenda. When they watched this election unfold last year, and he lost legitimately, he refused to step down, and they want him gone. And you don't bring in the USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest and newest aircraft carrier, with multiple offensive and defensive capabilities, multiple ships with it, 5,000 Marines and sailors, helicopters, fighter jets, to take out drug boats in the Caribbean. That is a aircraft carrier group that is used to base a major military operation. That was the aircraft carrier group that most recently was in the Eastern Mediterranean supporting Israel in the war against Iran. Now, the question is, when did the clock start on Maduro and when does the alarm go off here? Because remember, Trump, rewind back to the spring, when he gave Iran effectively 60 days to negotiate a nuclear deal, and then when they didn't do it in 60 days, looked the other way, and then supported Israel in their operation to take out the nuclear facilities in Iran. So that was 60 days. With Maduro, it goes back much further than 60 days. But when does his patience wear thin? Jill, I think, as soon as this weekend, when the aircraft carrier group is there, we could potentially see something. It could happen as soon as next weekend. It could happen within a few weeks. But the question is not a matter of if, but when, as the buildup continues here. They're trying to place pressure on Maduro and significantly people around Maduro to get him out, to send him into exile, and do this the, quote unquote, easy way and not engage in military operation here. What's happening behind the scenes when it comes to the Venezuelan military here? There's a lot we don't know. Remember that Trump has confirmed publicly that he has the CIA involved on the ground there in Venezuela right now. The Navy's involved, the Marine Corps is involved. There's attack submarines. I mean, Joe, this is a significant buildup. Some have said this is the most significant buildup since the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s. But certainly we had a major buildup for the operation that the U.S. conducted to take out the leader of Panama in 1989, Noriega, and arrest him. He was involved in the drug trade. He had gotten under the skin of the U.S. administration. This could be a similar situation. Remember, Maduro's not very popular in Venezuela. Nearly a quarter of the country has left. Joe, that would be the equivalent of 70 to 90 million Americans leaving the country over the course of 10 to 15 years. That is the significance, sort of percentage-wise, in terms of what has happened in Venezuela, in the impact that has had. So ultimately, not that much love there, but the question is, how long will this last? How clean of an operation would this be? Given we've discussed this on the podcast before, the U.S. history in regards to regime change in the region and around the world. Now, one of the issues with this whole operation is it legal? Does it violate international law? Does it violate the Constitution? You mentioned, Trump said last week, I have no intention of going before Congress for approval here, even as Congress is run by Republicans and been pretty deferential to him during this first year of his presidency. But, in the past, for those of you who asked, presidents have gone to Congress for use of force authorizations as recently as just after 9/11. But interestingly, that authorization that happened after 9/11, every president's been using that against every suspected terrorist in the world for the past 20 years. So that's Bush, that's Obama, that's Trump, that's Biden, that's Trump again. Now, that's linked to 9/11. In this case, he's now referring to them as narco-terrorists. No real 9/11 link, right? But he says he can do this without even a use of force authorization. Democrats extremely upset about that. And for the most part, Republicans sharing their frustration in private. One is sharing it publicly, though. I'm going to play a little bit of Rand Paul. He's the Kentucky libertarian Republican who is one of the few people who feels very comfortable criticizing Trump publicly and has led Trump to criticize him. Here is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul on Fox News over the weekend.
And so far, they have alleged that these people are drug dealers. No one said their name. No one said what evidence. No one said whether they're armed. And we've had no evidence presented. So at this point, I would call them extrajudicial killings. And this is akin to what China does, to Iran does with drug dealers. They summarily execute people without presenting evidence to the public. So it's wrong.
So you hear the frustration there from Rand Paul, saying, like, what are we doing here? We can't just be killing and randomly blowing up things. Like, he needs to come before Congress. Trump has said he will brief Congress at some point, but he doesn't, plan to seek their approval, their input here, even though they are a co-equal branch of government. Remember, there's a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head. The U.S. has deemed him a narco-terrorist. We're watching now we're seeing these headlines every day about boats being blown up. And they haven't come to the public with evidence or to Congress with much evidence as to what those boats are doing. But it's increasingly looking like, again, with this military buildup, the aircraft carrier, like this is going to turn into a much more serious operation in the coming days and weeks.
Okay, time now for the speed read from the Weather Channel. A Cat 5 hurricane is approaching Jamaica, and it could be one of the most intense, devastating on record in the country when it makes landfall in the next 24 hours. The National Hurricane Center warned Sunday that people in Jamaica need to, quote, seek shelter immediately. Damaging winds and heavy rainfall began Sunday and will continue to cause catastrophic and life-threatening flash flooding and numerous landslides today. The devastating Cat 4 to Cat 5 winds arrive tonight and tomorrow morning. The National Hurricane Center warned of extensive infrastructure damage, power and communication outages for long periods of time, and potentially prolonged isolation of certain communities in Jamaica and Haiti. It is approaching Kingston, Jamaica from the south. Torrential rain could also trigger catastrophic flooding in Haiti, and it will later strike eastern Cuba and parts of the Bahamas.
Jill, we're talking about 30 inches or 40 inches of rain here. Think about Hurricane Harvey in Houston. One of the issues here is that it is a very, very slow-moving storm. So the warnings here from the National Hurricane Center, from government authorities in Jamaica, have been very, very serious. And given the topography of Jamaica, the mountains there as well, it could lead to just torrential mudslides there and destruction of infrastructure. And that's really going to magnify the flooding threat. And we should note that according to NOAA's historical database, there is no record of such an intense hurricane ever making a landfall in Jamaica as they went through the archives here. So a lot of concern for Jamaica, then a lot of concern for Haiti and the Dominican Republic after this. And so it is a storm we're going to be closely monitoring over the next couple of days here.
From Reuters, President Trump landed in Malaysia this weekend to much fanfare. It was his first stop on a 5-day Asia tour, where he'll start by attending the ASEAN Summit, a biannual meeting on economic, political, and security concerns in Southeast Asian countries. Talks began Sunday on the sidelines of the summit between top Chinese and U.S. economic officials. The goal is to hash out the framework of a trade deal the presidents of both countries are expected to decide on later this week. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that those talks likely eliminated the threat of Trump's 100% tariffs on Chinese imports starting November 1st. Bessent says he believed that they came up with a very successful framework that also includes China letting the U.S. access more of its rare earth materials. That has been a very big issue. China has not offered any details about the meetings, but the U.S. said Trump and the Chinese President Xi Jinping are set to meet on Thursday on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea to sign off on the terms. Bottom line, Trump says, quote, "I think we are going to have a deal with China."
Jill, we talked last week about the roller coaster ride we're taking with China. So now it turns out that behind the scenes, there might be a deal here, even as the threats became more public here recently. Trump had recently threatened the new 100% tariffs on Chinese goods starting as soon as this upcoming weekend. That was in retaliation for China's expanded export controls on rare earth minerals. Rare earth minerals are key to a lot of the technology of the modern world, and China has the majority of them, which is why export controls have been very concerning to the president and why he's been retaliating with tariffs. China controlling about 90% of the world's supply of rare earth materials. And beyond that, there are a lot of other issues on the docket. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, saying there could be a hammering out of the TikTok deal, finalizing the TikTok deal this week. Then you have the fentanyl crisis. As much as we talk about the drug trade from Venezuela, a lot of the fentanyl that is killing Americans, the precursor chemicals for them come from China, then go to the cartels in Latin America. And so there has been huge pushback against the Chinese when it comes to fentanyl. There's also other trade expansion issues, port entrance fees, a variety of other issues that will be discussed. Also, the Chinese have effectively stopped buying U.S. soybeans, very concerning to U.S. soybean farmers. China's been one of their biggest markets for a long time. And then there are other issues. Remember, it's like China and the U.S. manage the world's economy and manage most of the world. So the U.S. is also looking for help in dealing with Putin and the Russians as the Ukrainian war grinds on, and Trump wants to end that. And that's where Trump can get help from Xi Jinping in regards to Putin. So a lot of elements here, a lot of levels here to the summit. Jill, we should note that when you talked about the fanfare at the top, if you are curious as to Donald Trump's dance skills, he was dancing with Malaysian dancers upon his arrival at the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur over the weekend. Though I shared on Premium clips of George W. Bush and how he danced at various ASEAN, it turns out all these countries that host these summits, they often will have their cultural dances at the airport. And so George W. Bush during his years danced a lot. So I shared some clips of Bush at the various summits versus Trump, and let the folks over on the premium Instagram feed this weekend decide who was the best presidential dancer.
And they said,
I have to say, Jill, a lot of people giving very high marks to George W. Bush. In fact, several people being like, is that AI video? I'm like, no.
Oh, no, that's him.
That was Bush. He liked to dance.
Well, Trump sort of has the Trump, the YMCA shuffle. Right. Which he did a version of, I think, when he landed at the summit.
I also included clips of Putin dancing classic Russian dances at a summit. This was back when we were still trying to make it work with the Russians, and there was still a G8 summit and whatnot before Putin started invading most of his neighbors. So there's clips of Bush and Putin engaged in various dance moves.
Meanwhile, in other tariff news, Trump said he is adding a 10% tariff on goods imported from Canada after he was upset by an anti-tariff ad featuring remarks from 1987 delivered by former President Ronald Reagan. The ad was paid for by the province of Ontario. Trump called the advertisement a fraud, even alleging that the audio of Reagan criticizing tariffs was AI. It was not AI. Trump says he has no intention of meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney during his trip in Asia, where the Prime Minister will also be in attendance. So the U.S. has a 35% tariff on all Canadian goods, although most are exempt under an existing free trade agreement. There are also sector-specific taxes on Canadian goods, and that includes a 15% levy on metals and 25% on automobiles. Canada is the only G7 country that has not reached a trade deal with the United States since Trump imposed tariffs on various countries earlier this year. On Friday, the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, said that he would pause the anti-tariff advertising campaign so that trade talks could resume. For those who have not heard it, here's a bit of the advertisement in question. Again, it features a speech that then President Reagan made during a 1987 national radio address that focused on foreign trade.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer.
So Trump was none too pleased with this ad. The Ronald Reagan Foundation also said they believe it misrepresented Reagan's original address, and the Ontario government didn't get permission to use the footage. It's a minute-long ad that includes excerpts from a 5-minute-long radio address. Presidents, until recent history, used to do a weekly radio address every Saturday morning. But we took the time here at Mo News to listen to the entire Reagan radio address along with the ad. And the message doesn't deviate from Reagan's message. Reagan was a major free trader. If you listen to the full radio address and then you listen to the ad, the excerpts they choose are very much in line with the message Reagan was presenting. Now, Reagan, like other presidents, including Joe Biden and Barack Obama, have used tariffs on specific products and industries, very specific when it comes to certain items, but not across the board tariffs. That was something Reagan was against. That's something that all modern presidents have been against until Trump came into office the second term. Reagan was very against protectionism, and you hear that in the radio address, as well as other Reagan speeches. So clearly the Canadians thought they were being smart here by using Reagan bites against Trump. But again, the Reagan Foundation says, again, they're saying that it misrepresents Reagan without going into further detail there. And then Trump over the weekend saying, this is AI. This was not AI. This is from the address. But nonetheless, the Canadians said, we're going to pause the ads, but they still aired over the weekend in the World Series games. And they certainly have gotten a lot of attention to it. Trump says the Canadians are not playing fairly here. And so he announced these 10% extra tariffs due to this advertising. We should note Ontario is home to the bulk of Canada's automobile manufacturing. They already face 25% tariffs. And it comes here as Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, recently was at the White House. They had a pretty good chat, pretty good public, at least public-facing chat, Trump and Carney. But Trump very unhappy here with this ad, has triggered him in a way. And it's interesting, Jill, because it comes just weeks before the Supreme Court is going to be hearing this huge case on presidential tariff authority. And the fact that Trump is, issuing tariffs because he's upset about a TV commercial, some are saying doesn't necessarily help his legal case about presidential authority, especially as the other side argues that he's being pretty arbitrary in how he issues across the board tariffs. And they're going to say, look, he was upset about a TV commercial and issued tariffs. Maybe there need to be some limits on tariff authority. That was the intention of the Constitution, since the Constitution gave Congress the majority of authority there. So that's something we're going to closely watch here, and we'll see, what happens next, especially as it appears closer to a deal with the Chinese, but we're further from a deal now with the Canadians.
From the Mo News Substack, as the government shutdown stretches towards its fifth week, hundreds of thousands of government employees are going without paychecks, so their bills are mounting and there is no clear resolution in sight. Some have been turning to side hustles like delivering food, walking dogs, and selling personal items as a way to bring in some income. Others are relying on food banks that have been hastily organized to provide federal workers and contractors with free groceries. Efforts that community service providers say reflect a broadening food insecurity caused by the shutdown. It comes as Democrats and Republicans continue to stand their ground. They have not been able to come to a compromise for more than 4 weeks now. Senate Democrats continue to refuse to sign on to a government spending bill that does not extend enhanced tax credits for the Affordable Care Act healthcare plans. Those credits are set to expire at the end of this year. The enhanced tax credits give financial assistance to the vast majority of the 24 million people who are enrolled in the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. The premium costs could now more than double, from an average of about $900 this year to more than $1,900 next year. And this from the Wall Street Journal: health insurance, no surprise, I'm sure, to anybody listening from the United States, more expensive than ever. And that's whether you're enrolled in one of those federal programs that we were just mentioning, or if you get health insurance through your job, or if you pay for it yourself. The average cost of a family plan through an employer has climbed to nearly $27,000 in 2025. That is up 6% from the previous year. It is the third straight year of steep increases. This data from KFF, which is an independent health policy research organization, and a similar increase is expected next year, nearly double the rate of inflation.
So there's a lot happening here, Jill. We should just note, at the top there, it doesn't appear the sides are any closer to any agreement this week. We could finish out the week without any special deal to end the government shutdown, especially with the president out of the country for most of the week. And then you have the issue here of the price of health insurance, which we all know. Most of us are experiencing these increases here, regardless of where we're getting our health insurance from. So the question is why? And we've been diving into this. We did a deep dive on the Mo News Substack newsletter, which is our afternoon newsletter. It's free and available. So check that out over at mo.news/newsletter, or just search Mo News over on Substack. Among the issues here, the popularity of GLP-1 weight loss drugs. Nearly half of large employers cover GLP-1s for weight loss, at least currently. Next year, some are tightening eligibility or dropping coverage altogether due to just the costs associated with GLP-1's explosion across the marketplace for weight loss and not just for diabetes. But beyond the GLP-1 issue, there are a lot of other reasons why prices are going up. Consolidation in the healthcare market, doctors charging more prevalent chronic conditions, people increasingly needing more care, rising drug costs, rising hospital costs factor in here, and they show no signs of slowing. So higher costs mean more people go without insurance, which then raise premiums for everybody, right? Because then those people without insurance are using the emergency room as their insurance. And so the people with insurance are then being forced to pay more. So ultimately here, this, just keeps feeding the other thing in a cycle. And already the US spends more on healthcare than any other country in the world. We spent about $5 trillion with a T just back in 2023, or about $15,000 per person. That's about double what other wealthy nations spent. There's a whole argument that we should go on a larger government program that it would actually make things cheaper overall, that the private system we have here in the US is not making anyone healthier and costing us much more. At the same time, those against a larger government or a more expansive ACA, Obamacare-like program argue that the level of care that people get or the wait times that they get with countries with a more socialized system of healthcare are a major problem. And here in the US, you're not confronted with those issues. But then again, it depends on how much you pay. And those with the most money tend to get the best service here. So the state of play here, not good. Prices continue to go up. And that is one of the key issues, again, in the backdrop of the government shutdown as it heads into week 4 into week 5.
From NPR, Travis Kelce has a new passion project, and it's got to do with his longtime love of roller coasters. The Kansas City Chiefs tight end joined an activist investor campaign aimed at saving Six Flags. Kelce and other investors put in around $200 million to buy nearly a tenth of the theme park operator, aimed at getting Americans to line up for roller coasters at the popular theme park. Six Flags has suffered in recent years because of COVID, low attendance, bad weather, and broken roller coasters. Its merger last year with rival theme park company Cedar Fair did little to get it out of the red. Kelce would be actively involved in the efforts to reinvigorate the Six Flags brand. He talked about it on his podcast, New Heights, on Wednesday, saying that the proposal came across his desk and he couldn't pass it up. He said he wants to give families the fun and memories that he had with his brother growing up.
So just as we talk about Taylor Swift Inc., we can increasingly talk about Travis Kelce Inc. here. He's developed a wide-ranging investment portfolio in recent years, businesses that he's passionate about, namely beer, games, and clothing. He usually invests in more established brands, but apparently after months of due diligence here, he's gotten into Six Flags, and apparently he noted that he talked about it with Taylor. The two of them love amusement parks. He says he got his prestige season pass ready to rock and roll. And as soon as the football season is over, he's going to be hitting up the parks. Joe, I guess close to him, there's a Six Flags over St. Louis, a number of locations on the East Coast, a couple in Texas, and then 3 out in California among the 20-something locations currently for Six Flags. But we'll see what Travis brings to the game here and whether he calls in a favor from the fiance to try to juice some sales there.
And finally, from the Wall Street Journal, there is a new category of consumer tech emerging, and it is focused on the bathroom. A first-of-its-kind product called the Dakota began shipping in the U.S. last week. It attaches to the side of your toilet and uses cameras and sensors to analyze urine and stool, aiming to turn what we typically flush away into health data. Dakota comes from Kohler Health, which is a new division of the kitchen and bath company. The device can detect hydration levels based on urine color, stool consistency, and even the presence of hemoglobin, which is a protein found in blood that can signal more serious issues. The results are delivered through a mobile app, which does require a monthly subscription. And Dakota's not the only game in town here. The French health tech company Withings is also preparing to launch a product called the U-Scan, which is a Wi-Fi connected cartridge system that analyzes vitamins and hormone levels from urine. Meanwhile, the toilet maker Toto has a high-end model that has a built-in stool scanner available in Japan and recently introduced in the US. Do we want to know, Moshe?
I don't know, cameras attached to your toilet. Jill, there's a lot of privacy questions here for obvious reasons, right? Among other things. Supporters, though, of the technology say it taps into the growing focus on gut health and could catch early warning signs of conditions like dehydration, digestive inflammation, and even cancer based on its assessment of your stool and urine. And unlike wearables, a smart toilet is something you can't forget to use, of course. So there's a lot of hype recently around gut health. And people generally don't eat enough fiber, which can trigger inflammation. And researchers have been investigating the connection between our digestive systems and cancer rates. So the Wall Street Journal reporter recently reviewed some of these devices, the Dakota device you mentioned, and the app, which requires a subscription for $7 a month. They delivered the results to the reporter's phone, some of the insights they gained. This is the Dakota app to the Wall Street Journal reporter. Focus on hydration. Pour yourself a glass of water. Then at another point, after another rotation, you've been making healthy choices, and it shows. And then apparently some vague messages like, listen to your gut. Your body is trying to tell you something about a change in your gut health. Mystery from the Dakota device. But again, there are some major questions there. Anxiety questions, too, creating unnecessary anxiety as you get various messages related to whatever you recently flushed down. And there's a price question here. Dakota retails for about $600. Of course, there's also the monthly subscription. Toto's scanning toilets, $3,000. $3,000 for a toilet there. But the researchers say the potential here is significant. Remember that we were able to track COVID and flu and various things in the city sewer system. So, the country, the FDA, the CDC, use analysis of what's in the sewage to get a sense of diseases that are afflicting us. So, right now it's early generation tech, but connecting the toilet to the internet and our medical records might be a sign of the bathroom of the future, Jill.
The urine analysis in terms of hydration, that one feels unnecessary. It's like, just look at your pee, and if it's yellow, keep drinking. If it's clear, great job.
You've done a good job. Great job.
The other stuff, okay, I buy into that. The hydration stuff feels kind of silly.
All right. Jill is not spending $3,000 on a toilet.
Save your money. Yes, just use your eyes. Take a look. Peek in there.
Jill, we plan to be over at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas in early January. I'll let you know. As we look at new tech at the Consumer Electronics Show in January, I will ask about toilet tech. And you guys let me know. If you've experimented with one of these devices or you're looking to, we at the Mo News podcast are very interested in your feedback. All right, now time for On This Day in History. On this day in 1904, the New York City subway officially opened on this day. It opened with a couple lines. Today, the subway system has 36 lines, 472 stations, and the longest line, the A train, stretches 31 miles from the northern tip of Manhattan to the far southeast corner of Queens. 4 million people approximately every day take the New York City subway system. On this day in 1975, rocking the cover of Time and Newsweek on the same day, Bruce Springsteen, after the release of his breakthrough album, Born to Run. That was a big deal at that time. If you got the cover of Newsweek, cover of Time magazine, tens of millions of Americans were getting that magazine once a week. It's back when we could do news once a week, Jill.
Yes, that had major cultural significance to be on the cover of both Time and Newsweek. It said a lot. On
this day in 1982, China officially announces that it has surpassed 1 billion people in its population. Today, China has just over 1.4 billion, just over 40 years later. India, a couple years ago, actually surpassed China. So India, now the most populous country on earth, closer to 1.5 billion people. Interestingly, China is about to peak and will be going down. And over the course of the next 20 to 40 years, might drop below a billion people. One country that will then rise above a billion and become close to one of the most populous countries on earth, Nigeria. So there's some interesting population trends we'll be watching over the next few decades here. And on this day in 2004, the Boston Red Sox officially end the Curse of the Bambino, winning their first World Series in 86 years. The Curse of the Bambino, named after Babe Ruth. The alleged hex on Boston began in 1920 when the team's owner sent Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees in exchange for $125,000 and a personal loan. And the belief in Boston was by trading away Babe Ruth, one of the greatest, if not the greatest baseball player of all time, a hex was put on the team, and it took them 86 years to win it, thanks in part to a young executive named Theo Epstein, who put together the team that would win that 2004 championship. Theo Epstein, notably, would then move to the Chicago Cubs, where he ended the Cubs' 108-year drought without a World Series. So Theo Epstein ending the Red Sox drought and the Cubs drought within just about 10 years. And in music history, on this day in 1989, Tom Petty releases his hit song Free Fallin' on this day 36 years ago, October 27th, 1989. And sticking with the 1989 theme, someone born in that year, several years later, would make music history.
Who could it be, Moshe?
Who was born in 1989 related to music? On this day in 2014, Taylor Swift, just before her 25th birthday, would release her album, 1989. It was her 5th album, and that album, among many albums, would also win a Grammy for Album of the Year, as well as a Billboard Award for Album of the Year. Synonymous, Jill. Is there anything else you think about in 1989 besides Taylor Swift? She sort of owns that year at this point, right?
I think so, Moshe. I think we could give it to her.
We could give it to her, though I will note, now I just realized as I said it, the Berlin Wall fell that year. So that was... might be more significant. I don't know. The beginning of the end of the Cold War also happened in November. Actually, interesting numerical note. This is a fun fact for all of you. The fall of the Berlin Wall happened on November 9th, 11/9. And then, of course, 12 years later on 9/11, we would obviously see the terrorist attack. So many people kind of note history, 11/9 to 9/11. Marks an interesting time period into the Cold War, sort of where the modern world is trying to come back together. And then, of course, 9/11 is another demarcation point there. But I digress. We can do a numerology edition. But, well, I mean, speaking of numerology, Taylor Swift, right? She's been to numbers too. Maybe she can join us for the 11/9, 9/11, 1989 edition.
A couple of other quick things. The Tiananmen Square protests, also 1989.
Yes.
Pretty significant.
Yes.
Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing came out in 1989, and Seinfeld premiered in 1989. I don't know. I don't think we could give it to Taylor Swift anymore.
Okay. All right. See how this podcast goes. We want, sometimes it takes us a day to correct ourselves. In this case, it took us about 20 seconds.
We are always open to feedback, Moshe, even
sometimes
in real
from
time.
Ourselves.
Yes.
From ourselves.
All right. Thank you all for listening to the Mo News podcast, which is clearly a work in progress. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. The reviews really help.
See you guys back here tomorrow.
This is Leah. Thank you for listening from Mo Pocket with Mom and Dia.